Alleles here. In the last video, we learned how to predict the results of a mating if you know the genotype of the parents. Now we'll talk about where these alleles are located and some more about genes. Alleles are versions of genes. For example, pea plants have a gene for plant height, with an allele for tall and another allele for short. These genes are located on chromosomes. The chromosomes are in the nucleus of each cell. Different species have different numbers of chromosomes, but they always come in pairs. Humans have 23 pairs of chromosomes for 46 chromosomes total. Each gene is located on a specific pair of chromosomes. Each chromosome has one allele, one version of the gene. The other allele is on the other chromosome. I sneeze when going from a dark environment to a bright one. This is a genetic trait. The dominant form is a sun sneezer like me. Not sneezing in bright light is recessive. Technically, it's the photic sneeze reflex, but it's more fun to call it sun sneezing. The sun sneezing gene is located on chromosome number 2. Since I'm a sun sneezer, that means that one of the copies of this gene is dominant. So on one or both copies of my chromosome number 2 is the allele for sneezing in bright light. You have 23 pairs of chromosomes in the nucleus of each of your cells. Each chromosome is made of genes, one after another, like beads on a string. These genes lead to the traits that a person has. We call the traits the phenotype. Thus, the genotype, the actual genes, lead to the phenotype. Many times, the phenotypes we talk about are simple things like hair color, whether you can roll your tongue, or stuff like that. But phenotypes aren't only superficial stuff. Genes tell the body how to construct the heart, muscles, lungs, digestive system, and so on. Each of these are phenotypes. There isn't much noticeable variation in these because we don't pay attention to them as long as they get the job done. But there is some variation in all these things from person to person. In my previous video, I talked about Mendelian genetics. This is really the simplest case. There's one gene that determines the trait and only 2 alleles of the gene, with one dominant over the other. This is one reason I think Gregor Mendel was lucky in his choice of studying pea plants. Each of those traits is simple like this. But, of course, things aren't always so simple. Incomplete dominance is where a heterozygous genotype, one for dominant, the other for recessive, leads to a blending between the dominant and recessive versions. For example, hair can be straight or curly. But if the genotype is heterozygous, the hair is wavy. This is between straight and curly. There are other genes involved in things like how curly the curly hair should be. Codominance is another special case. Here, when the genotype is heterozygous, both dominant and recessive versions appear. This can happen in a flower, where white is dominant and red is recessive. With codominance, flower petals can be part white and part red, showing both variations at the same time. So far, these have all been single genes with 2 alleles. Things do get more complicated. There can be one gene with multiple alleles. This is the case with our blood types. Humans can have type A, B, AB, or O blood. There's an allele for type A and an allele for type B. There's also an allele O for neither type, kind of like a neutral. That's 3 different alleles in one gene. If you have type A blood, then the genotype is either AA or AO. If you have type B blood, then the genotype is either BB or BO. If you have type AB blood, then the genotype has to be AB. Showing both traits, it's codominant. And if you have type O blood, then the genotype must be OO. In this case, 3 alleles lead to 4 different phenotypes. Here, I'm only dealing with the ABO gene. The Rh factor, plus and minus, is another gene. Then, there are traits that are controlled by multiple genes. Skin color is controlled by the interactions of at least 4 different genes. Other things controlled by multiple genes are hair color, eye color. Some genetic diseases are also controlled by many genes. Well, in 3 videos, we've looked at how Gregor Mendel started studying inheritance with his pea plants. We looked at how dominant and recessive alleles interact to make different phenotypes. And finally, we've looked at some more complex parts of genetics. Don't worry, there's lots more of genetics to study in high school. Thanks for watching. Riley Sy out.